Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Media Monitor, the show that analyses your news media both here at home and abroad. This is the SABC News Channel, independent and impartial. And I'm Peter Ndoro. Thanks for joining us. 2019 is upon us, and usually at this time we look forward to the future and what lies ahead. The media industry is having to do just that, given the advent of the fourth industrial revolution, and that's what we'll be exploring this morning. So we unpack the fourth industrial revolution, which is the latest major industrial era since the initial industrial revolution of the 18th century. We also examine the impact of the fourth industrial revolution has had on the media industry and also perhaps what's likely in the years ahead. So, Industrial Revolution 4.0 is the buzzword in many forums. The revolution is widely predicted to bring with it a disruption and displacement, including job losses caused by automation and artificial intelligence. This is a fundamental issue of concern to all developing countries, especially those with growing populations, such as South Africa. Around the world, we see a decline in newspaper circulations. There's also no way that South African media industry can avoid it or escape it, and we've seen a number of publications already disappear, one already in this past week, and we'll talk about that. Well, to help me unpack this future that's upon us, I'm now pleased to introduce Professor Ilva Rodney Gumede from the University of Johannesburg. Thanks very much for joining us. And we also have a media analyst, Melo Maholejo. Thank you very much for joining us. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so fourth industrial revolution 4.0, I mean, we're already seeing it happen. The way that we consume information now, I heard a statistic the other day that 90% of all the data in the world has been created in the last 2 years. So that means we just changed things. We perhaps haven't realized it. So let's bring it home to the industry that we're in as media and journalists. What does the fourth industrial revolution mean for us? Just your first thoughts. Let's start with you, Ilva.
Now, I think there are lots of challenges, but I think there are equal opportunities in this space. I think for the media industry, what we are afraid of, and we've spoken about this before, probably the rise and proliferation of fake news, for example, which has been triggered then through some technological platforms that have sort of arisen through on the backbone of the fourth industrial revolution as well. But there, as I say, those are some of the challenges. Job losses was mentioned in the insert here, for example. The opportunities, I think, are equal, and I think that we have an opportunity to shape this space if we think carefully about it. Go back to real, good journalism, real good storytelling, for example. So some of those just overall, things that we can think about. We can talk about them in some more depth as well.
All right, and your initial thoughts, Melo?
So for me, an interesting aspect of this industrial revolution is that we speak of it, but then a lot of us don't really have a tangible grasp of what it is and what it portends for the future, even what like the definition of the fourth industrial revolution is. So for me, my point of entry into this thing is to contrast it with the previous industrial revolution, right? Because currently the way we talk about automation, we talk about artificial intelligence, talk about digitization, internet, and so on. But for me, those things are just tools, right? Tools that are going to facilitate this thing that are hopefully flesh out, right? So if you look back in the previous industrial revolution, it's the same as describing it as being about assembly lines, being about the production of goods and so on, right? But ultimately what that initial industrial revolution was about democratization of access to goods and service, right? And that democratization of access to goods and service you facilitated by having sort of like mass production, right? So that paradigm has been existent over the past 200 years. It hasn't really much changed, right? So in this new industrial revolution, what's going to change now is that we're going to change the paradigm of mass production in order to facilitate democratization of access to goods and services, right? And the way that we're going to do that is the way we're going to do it through the internet, through artificial intelligence, through machine learning and all of these things, right? So to make a bit more concrete what I'm saying, right, I can give an example, for example, with multi-choice, right? If you look at multi-choice, actually the way it operates, this DSTV model, it operates within the paradigm of a mass production process, right? If you mass production, perhaps if you draw a parallel maybe with Model T Ford, the way it's produced with assembly lines and so on, right? Say DSTV, it's the same thing. We produce the thing in bulk and we stream everything, the same thing to everybody, right? So what is the Industrial Revolution saying within that context, right? The Industrial Revolution says, you know what, we want to have personalized services, goods, want to have ad hoc personalized services, and want to have them on demand, right? Which is not what DSTV is doing at the moment, right? Because a first order approximation to that is that this Explorer smart box thing where you can record programs, rewind, replay at your leisure and whatever, right? But that's actually not what people want, right? People want to be able to choose the programs they want, when they want to watch them, and have them be able to do them on ad hoc and so on.
That's fascinating. I mean, I remember back in the day, we used to put in our VHS recorders and record programs if we weren't there, because otherwise we'd miss it. And now, as you're saying, is we don't want to be stuck on our schedule. We want them to give us what we want when we want it. How has that changed the way we consume news? Because before, the family gathered around the television at 8 o'clock and we watched at that time, and we had what we called prime time viewing. I don't know that there is such a thing anymore.
I mean, actually, in huge parts of our society, and particularly on the continent, radio is still very big. And it used to be the radio that gathered people. I think, you know, one need to take a step back and look at it. And I think that, you know, I think you're alluding to the fact that actually, you know, when we talk about an industrial revolution, there are certain things that brings to mind. I think that we also need to factor in that actually these revolutions have also been more than just the, you know, the emphasis on industrial is actually wrong, particularly with regards to the fourth industrial revolution. It's a misnomer in a sense because it actually entails so much more. And we're moving away from the industrial society in so many ways into the information society, the data society, with that, which actually the third industrial revolution sort of talks to the digital revolution, but now we're taking that so much further. And I think what's interesting then with the fourth industrial revolution is the idea of artificial intelligence. And I think that's also what makes people quite fearful, you know. So it's not only machinery that's going to change and assembly lines that you talked about, it's actually how we interact with technology. And it's almost like, you know, the questions are being asked, are humans going to be obsolete? Are we all going to be obsolete in this new world? Eh? So some of those questions are the ones that people are asking and are fearful about. But coming back then to the media industry, as you say, I think that there's the, you know, opportunities where audience then are demanding something. You know, we want it now, we want it 24/7, we want to be able to access it and actually, you know, have something that we're in control of. Hey? However, there's also the risk of people being left behind. And I think that that's the problem. And we haven't solved the problems of access, for example. So access to all of this new technology is going to be our biggest challenge, I think. So you know, there are opportunities, but if we can couple that up, if there's I called it the other day, a tipping point, where actually, you know what, access meets, you know, these other requirements about how we use, you know, technology. Maybe there's a, you know, some kind of tipping point where actually, you know what, we can all partake in this. But
I mean, I think access, we're moving quite quickly now, isn't it? I mean, it's almost like this kind of geometric progression where fiber optics is being laid, the cables are being laid, and the number of phones that people have in South Africa on average is quite high, so that maybe the screens are going to be smartphones, and that the penetration of smartphones is going to be the game changer. But you know, I keep thinking, it's not what we do that's changing, it's how we do it, isn't it? Because before we told stories orally, then somebody wrote it down with a quill, you know, and dipped into ink. And then somebody told the same story with a typeset, and then somebody told the same story with a typewriter, and then somebody told the same story. And artificial intelligence, we've got autocorrect. Wasn't that the first artificial intelligence? So that we have adapted to the technology. And I wonder if that's really all that's happening.
No, absolutely. I mean, I'd pick up on a point that the professor here raised earlier about changing from sort of like an industrial society that produces commodities to an information one, right? But ultimately, if you look at it on a macro scale, the information now is the commodity, right? Your Facebooks and your Googles are so powerful and so wealthy because information has become that commodity through which they manipulate, right? So for me, the thing that you're raising, Peter, is very important about the phones, right? Because ultimately, part of the print debate that we're having about newspaper circulations declining is about people not buying newspapers anymore. But then ultimately, the thing that I think we've lost in the debate is what was the function of newspapers, right? There's two critical functions that newspapers served. Newspapers served as a site for curation of news, right? And then the second function that they served that was very critical, it was a distribution platform, right? So now with the onset of this digital era that we're in, there's a different distribution platform, right? And then also, to some extent, you can also make the argument that part of where artificial intelligence comes in is that artificial intelligence and all of these algorithms that are streaming personalized news to you, that is now part of the new curation function now, the way the news is being curated in the future, right? So now the question that people have to ask in traditional media industries is that, is it really a prudent strategy to be investing in distribution platforms such as print when actually there are much cheaper distribution platforms such as your Twitters, your Facebooks, and your Instagrams, right? Because previously, back in the day, to give an example, is that some of the more glamorous, high-fashion things, I'd need to go and buy magazines like, I don't know, whatever magazines they are, even Drum at one point like serve some of those functions, right? But at the moment, I can just go on Instagram, right, and find out what Bonang is doing, find out what Black Coffee is doing. I don't actually need to have that thing, right? So I think that is changing in terms of the distribution function and the curation function. And part of the dangers that the professor is alluding to, which I fully agree with, is that these algorithms, right, previously I could come to you and say, Peter, you're the editor of City Press, right? Why are you curating your newspaper in this way? Why are you printing these stories in this way, right? Now we're having algorithms sitting in the background and pushing all of these news out, right? Now what does that rise? It creates a decentralized platform distribution of news. It creates this phenomenon which we're calling now fake news.
Yeah, and you know, it's just, I realized the other day for the first time is that when you look at your Twitter and it's what's trending, it's not what's trending for everybody. It's actually what they think I'm interested in that's trending for me, which was fascinating. I don't know how they work it out, but there I was thinking that I'm sharing the same platform as everyone. But anyway, we'll continue to explore the Fourth Industrial Revolution and perhaps take a closer look at the impact coming up after this. Stay with us.
Fashion, travel, music, food, and food. Did I mention food?
We at Trends Travel love bringing you cuisines from around the world.
Forbes US have declared Gabon the coolest city destination to visit in the world for 2018-2019.
You know, as designers, we're always setting trends and also doing like high fashion. So it was quite nice to come and see the ready-to-wears every day.
This is a space for every woman in South Africa.
I want to speak to the women who cannot walk a kilometer in this country without looking over their shoulders, without being groped or harassed.
I was not born like this. In 2011, I got stabbed by a boyfriend.
How many centimeters? How many centimeters long is the political will to end the scourge of violence against women, against children?
I was locked up in the room for 2 weeks.
There are measures, there are laws, there are policies. But these policies and measures and laws do not speak to these lived realities.
We must fight the culture of gender-based violence.
This is where young men must be taught that women are not their footballs. This is where young men must be taught to respect women.
We are at the forefront of Africa's tech discussion.
We're already planning for the 5G spectrum to be licensed by 2020.
In Mauritius, for fiber migration, we had a strategy. On network, we have gadgets, robots, and more.
We focus on investing in entrepreneurs and technology in emerging markets.
There's technology and social media news on Network with me, Spomenele Zondi, every Saturday at 8:30 p.m. and every Sunday at 5:30 p.m.
Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor, and we're taking a look at the fourth industrial revolution and what it's doing and going to do for the media industry in particular. We sort of introduced the topic just before the break, and now we really want to get into the kinds of things that are happening and the impact that it's having already. And one good example is what you're about to see now. So the first thing is I'm going to show you my colleague reading the news, and this is kind of the television you're used to. Let's take a look at Leanne doing what she does best.
Our top story this morning, former President Jacob Zuma will know today whether he will have to personally pay for costs related to his fraud, corruption, money laundering and racketeering case or not. The High Court in Pretoria will hand down judgment on the DA and EFF's application to have the agreement authorising state funding for Zuma's defence in criminal cases set aside. The DA and the EFF have asked the court for a declaratory order that it was illegal to pay Zuma's legal fees.
All right, so that's what you're used to. This is what you see on your televisions every single day. Well, Prof, just before the break said perhaps humans might be replaced. Well, there's an experiment that's playing out already, and now I introduce a virtual colleague reading the news, and this is what the future might look like.
Hello, everyone. I'm an English artificial intelligence anchor. This is my very first day in Xinhua News Agency. The development of the media industry calls for continuous innovation and deep integration with the international advanced technologies. I will work tirelessly to keep you informed as texts will be typed into my system, uninterrupted. I look forward to bringing you the brand new news experiences. As an AI news anchor under development, I know there is a lot for me to improve.
All right, so there you have it. I'm not feeling too threatened at the moment, but it could get better. So this is where we're going, isn't it? I mean, and I suppose, you know, it's like where we automate things that happen overnight, where you can't have people sitting in a thing taking your parking ticket, and this is the extension of that. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts about this as the future? Let's start with you, Mel.
So for me, this speaks exactly to the theme that through the lens through which I wish to understand the fourth industrial revolution, right, is that personalized, ad hoc and on-demand services, right? So once you start to moving towards that world, then the question becomes, why can't I have my own personalized news anchor reading news to me? I already have my own data stream on Twitter, right? Why can't I have that, right? Why do we all have to listen to the same news reader? And for me, that speaks precisely to that thing where artificial intelligence is going to enable this personalization and customization of news platforms, right? So it's not necessarily about replacing people, but it's about how are you going to effect this personalization of news, right? In a similar way, maybe I can make a tangential example, right? In terms of clothes, right? Part of the way we consume clothes now is that we go to Woolworths, Edgar's, wherever, and the standard size is cut for everybody, right? Why can't I have my own clothes cut to my own specific size, right? And part of the reason is that you can't really run an efficient production process with people doing that, right? So how are you going to do that? You'll have machines, you'll have artificial intelligence agents being able to do that out for you. Similar thing, that's why for me, a lot of people, when they say that, no, my industry is proof, like it's safe from this fourth industrial revolution and so on, I'm saying that the part of the problem is that you're understanding it in a very narrow concept, right? Once you start asking yourself, what goods or services am I providing to people that can be personalized, be subjected to ad hoc demand, and be wanted on demand, then the question then changes slightly, right? Because then you start realizing that across many sectors, this thing will be impacted. Similarly to what we're seeing now with the news anchor, where we've taken for granted that, no, we'll always have Peter reading the news to us.
So it is quite scary for me. Prof?
Yeah, no, you know, to a certain extent, yes. So the on-demand, of course. But we mustn't forget that we are actually predisposed. There's a human nature that we want to interact. So why we react differently to you reading the news, or Leanne that we just saw, and our Chinese colleague, is that we don't see the facial expressions. We don't have that, and that's hugely important for us as humans. So that be able to read faces and interact is something that's valuable to it, and that is how we conduct ourselves in terms of, that's how we communicate as humans. Sorry, so that's hugely important. So that's not going to go away. And I think that, you know, look at some phenomena such as social media platforms such as Facebook. Why we interact on Facebook is because we have an interaction. So the idea of having your own personalized newsread, it might be something, but it's never going to take away that we still want for us where we interact and where we share things. So the sharing of news is also very important to us. Otherwise, we wouldn't gossip. Okay. So, you know, it's all of these things. And it's not going to, you know, one is not going to necessarily take away the other.
So maybe if I can just add something. So it's a very important point that she's raising there, the professor, is that there's something that Ngugiwa Thiong'o speaks to, and he calls it the group reception of art, right? And if you take it, for example, back to the pre-colonial black society where we're sitting around a fireplace and we're sharing stories and so on. So that sharing we can reinterpret amongst ourselves and have different perspectives and so on, right? But if you think back, Peter, maybe even 20 years, in South Africa, what used to happen in terms of, say, for example, your dramas, your Bophelo ke Semphego, Kalahari, Nhlala kwa Bafileko and so on, is that everybody used to watch that same thing. The following day, everybody would be discussing that. But today you have so many soapies, Isibaya, Queen and whatever, there's like a million of them, right? There isn't necessarily that cohesive discussion that we have around society. It's become balkanized in a way. Yes, to some extent that is very problematic because it's creating silos of people that have common interests and we're not really talking across those silos. But I think this thing to some extent has happened.
So with mobile, with social media and all of this interacting, what I'm starting to get a sense of is we're trying to find communities more than ever before, so that as you're talking about, we might have a Isibaya community and everybody watches and talks about it in that place, whatever that is. And so that as storytellers, we're starting to think maybe about telling stories to communities, not to the general public. Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
I think that's very, very important. I think that that's a lesson learned for journalism as well, that actually here, mainstream is meeting community media, or it has to, because we also have the ability to target the news to communities and become parts of these communities. Robots will never be able to do so, but we can actually engage with the communities that we belong to. And that also overcomes certain language barriers, certain cultural barriers, ideas of various, you know, divisions in our society. And actually we are part of our communities, and we need to go back to that and actually get out in our communities, and that's where we can do good journalism.
I think for me, if I can just add, one thing that's very important, pertinent to me, is the paradigm of static versus dynamic data, right? Is that the way we've traditionally consumed news and the way content has been produced is that we'll direct it to certain demographics, right? Whether it be age, race, income group, geographical area and so on, right? But then part of what this internet revolution, all of this data that all of these Facebooks and Googles have, is that you have much more refined and much more granular data, right? So as you're correctly pointing out, I think you can be able to target your content specifically to a smaller group of people and be able to design a business model that is actually much more sustainable across these micro targeting services.
So what it means for me as a journalist then is that in the future, the idea that I could do a story on an environment this week, and then next week I'm assigned onto a financial story, the following week I'm assigned to a legal story, that's going to disappear because you have to become specialized in that area of news for that particular community. Isn't that what that means for us as journalists, that we're going to become specialists, all of us?
I mean, I think that specialized in the sense that, yes, to reading certain, you know, stories that are valuable for that particular community, as you say, but that might entail actually a lot of things. So financial news aren't necessarily just financial news anymore. They're coupled up to the bigger microeconomic and political economy landscape. You know, there are so many things that we need to think through. So in a sense, yes, specialists, that we need to know what we're doing, how we're doing it, but I think it's much more of understanding where do these stories land in this particular community and what does it mean for a particular group of people or a particular community. And I think that's fantastic, and I think that's really good journalism. That's what journalism should be.
So here's another one for you. You're looking at the journalist level, right? We can take it one step higher and look at the media house level, right? So you have certain media houses that are very popular with certain demographics, right? So what's preventing us now from going into a world where you're having sort of like a fragmented landscape where certain people are very good at appealing to certain constituencies, right? And I think that's part of the reason why what we're seeing like on social media, right, is that different people with their content appeal to different types of individuals. And I think that's something obviously that's going to happen. So in terms of how media houses structure themselves and are able to filter that into their operating model, I think that's going to be very important going forward.
So 2019, we saw Marie-Claire say that Sayonara, South Africa, Ndalo Media, we heard as well, is closing down. So that's Destiny Magazine and other publications. So what are we likely to see 2019, 2020? What's going to be our media landscape looking like going forward?
It's difficult to say, and I think what we need to consider is this idea. Firstly, going back a little bit to what we just discussed, we need to understand that we can't talk about the public anymore. We need to talk about publics, and there are many publics, and sometimes they overlap. So I think that's one thing. And if we understand that, we can also, look at the media landscape and see what we need and see what we have. I do think, and I hope that we will see sort of investment of rethinking the news media scape. And I think that why outlets such as Marie-Claire collapsed, for example, or didn't make it in our context, is because there is enough competition online, and actually people who know the market much better and the audience much better. So I think that's one thing. But then coming back to the news media scape, I think that if we're going to combat fake news, we need to find outlets that actually focuses on credible news, where we can really say, and as the audience, put our trust in, and say that this is a news source. And coming up into 2019 and elections, we need that. We are, that's going to be hugely important for us as a society.
All right, and then perhaps final word for you, Mena?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think the whole trust issue, right? I mean, of the many functions that I think news agencies have served, is sort of being that intermediary that you can trust, right? It's just that over time we've taken it for granted that they've had sort of a monopoly on distribution, they have a monopoly on content. So with the rise of social media platforms, we see that they actually don't have a monopoly on content, no distribution, right? So it comes back to the basic thing of trust now, right? Because part of the problem that we have in the social media is that who can we trust, right? And it's often those people that are allied to traditional media establishments and so on. So I think that's going to be very important. In terms of your example that you talked about in terms of Marie-Claire and so on, for me, I think what you're seeing basically with the proliferation of a lot of these magazines, I mean, if you think back maybe 20 years, we didn't have as many magazines or publications, right? But then, and over the past 20 years, you've had an explosion, right? For me, it speaks precisely to this DSTV model, right? Where you had a few channels, then as an approximation to this individualized, personalized thing, you have an explosion of channels, right? But the problem is that then the business model becomes untenable now because you need to curate all of these publications and have staff manning it all the time, right? So instead, what you have is that you can have algorithms which are actually much cheaper to maintain and actually much more scalable, that they can curate content for you and push it out. So I think the publications or the agencies that are going to be able to survive going forward are those that are going to be able to take on technology. And I think NASPERS has actually shown the way. And actually, if you look at the financial results in terms of Media 24, like you can see that the profits, I mean, are flagging. I mean, they're incurring losses there. But where they're making a lot of money is all of this digital stuff.
All right, so we're going to have to leave it there. But thanks very much. So always been a pleasure talking to you. And I wish you both the best for 2019 and lots of conversations in the year ahead. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. All right, we're going to take a quick break, and then after that we're going to explore how ready is the public broadcaster for the fourth industrial revolution, especially given that we've entered this digital news era.
Hey, Baba. You've been partying the whole night.
You complain a lot, man. If it's not the leaves, then it's the noise.
I've asked you so nicely before. Now I'm calling my lawyer.
Ooh, I am so scared. And like, where's your lawyer?
My lawyer is right here. Clientele leaders.
Problems with the neighbors? Rental disputes? Advice on maintenance matters? Drawing up a will? Clientele Legal will speak up for you. SMS DEFEND to 32281. We'll call you back.
The Kalahari Transportier Park is a large wildlife preserve and conservation area in southern Africa. Kalahari means place of thirst. The total area is 38,000 square kilometers. Approximately 3/4 of the park lie in Botswana and 1/4 in South Africa. South Africa embraced the concept of transporteers linking ecological reserves across national borders. On the 12th of May 2000, President Festus Mogae of Botswana and Thabo Mbeki of South Africa formally launched South Africa's first peace park. It has 200 species of birds, including vultures, mammalians such as black Kalahari lions, and large herds of herbivores, namely elands, springboks, blue wildebeest, and more.
Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor, and we continue with our conversation about the fourth industrial revolution. And we ask, what plans does the public broadcaster, the SABC, particularly the digital news, have in place for the fourth industrial revolution? And to join me in conversation about that, I'm now joined by Isaac Mina, who's the SABC digital news editor. Thanks very much for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
All right, so I think, and I'm going to blow our own horn, I love our digital platform, and I go there a lot first before I go to other places, and perhaps that's because of my nature now, given I want to believe I'm a fourth industrial. But I guess for some, the fourth industrial revolution has happened, and for others, it's still far away. Working on this platform, you have to try and get to as many people as possible. Some of them just aren't technologically enabled.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that?
No, you're quite right. In fact, the International Telecoms Union just announced recently that this month, half of the global population is connected to the internet. In South Africa, it looks a little bit better. We're 60% connected to the internet. But that means that for many people, the fourth industrial revolution is far away. While especially our urban audiences, one could say, would enjoy similar benefits, although with high data prices and so on, especially younger people, even in urban areas, if they can't get onto free Wi-Fi, they really struggle to get the full benefits of it. So as a SABC, we need to make sure that we try and cover all bases, right? So our traditional radio and TV services have really good reach. We reach about 28 million people on a regular basis. But over time, as has happened in the developed world, also in our country, you start to see a tapering off from the traditional services. So the challenge here is, how do we keep serving public news to audiences, whether they're on the traditional media or whether they're on the new media platforms? So the SABC needs to make sure that on our radio services, for instance, that we continue to provide full coverage, while we also try to take that coverage plus more and put it on as many online platforms as possible.
And I'm just thinking out loud now, the storytelling itself, one gets a fear that perhaps those on the traditional platforms might be getting left behind, because the way stories are told in a digital environment is slightly different. Or is there a middle ground that you can tell the same story slightly differently, but it is the same story ultimately for the consumer?
So you're quite right that one needs to think about how different consumers would consume the news. So while you would offer news in traditional formats, one would also think about one of the key words in the fourth industrial revolution, which is the socialization of news. Meaning, suddenly, news is not a one-way process. Suddenly, when you at a news event and you live tweet and people start interacting with you, you're now part of the news. And that is a mind shift that is necessary. It causes a mind shift in the newsrooms. Another example would be, so typically in the news workflow, there would be many checks and balances. So a reporter would gather the content, prepare it, editor or a news producer will check it, the editor will check it, and then it will go on air. But now you're right in the field, you're live tweeting on a story, and you're just doing it directly.
Right.
So there's different relationships also between editors and reporters. So the editor must make sure my reporter in the field, is my reporter able to provide independent, impartial coverage? And how do I brief the reporter? The editor also can't just look at news normally in the normal production process. They need to monitor what's happening in the field. They need to monitor all kinds of social media things. So it drastically changes the way news is produced.
And also, our country is particularly young. There's more young people than people like us with grey hair. And so that this, once upon a time, we all sat behind the TV at 8 o'clock and watched the main news, and there was Gail Warden and Adrian Steed. Now you've got to engage with young people in their language, in the way that they like to consume things.
Yeah.
And us old fogies are thinking, what's happened?
Look, and I think there are two key things that you're referring to. One is the difference between the old appointment news, where what you put on TV, that will determine your schedule, right? The viewer schedule. Now it's different. I can now determine when I want news. And as a news organization, we must be ready with the news. The other important thing is the shift from a platform-based approach to news to what I would call a story-centric approach. Platform-based means, like you have in traditional newsrooms, you have a team here and they do radio. You have another team and they do TV. You have another team in certain newsrooms and they do print. But story-centric changes the whole perspective of how news should happen. It means you start with a story, then you look at what could be the visual, audio, multimedia, textual, photographic elements of that story. You go out and you now need a multimedia, multi-platform enabled journalist, right? To go out, collect all of those, also makes a distinction between what some would say fast news and slow news. Fast news, meaning getting out the story now in short, sharp snippets, which could be video, which could be tweets, which could be a quick live crossing from radio. And then the slow news, the context, the interpretation, the longer pieces, the background, the consequences, the reaction. So some news organizations have started to change their whole organizational structure to say, let's first deal with the fast news, and here's my team focusing on the fast news. While we're doing the fast news, my slow news team is also on the story, and they start looking at what do we do in the next hour or in the hours beyond.
Days.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, again, also you with big data now, you have the ability to hyperlink things. So as I'm reading a story and I see TRC, never heard of it before, because we've just doing a story about Alex Bahrain, and I can click on TRC and I can go back to, is that what this TRC was about? And this is a change, isn't it? Because you wouldn't be able to do it in the traditional way.
It's a big change, Peter, and you know, with the so-called juniorization of newsroom staff, so me and you, we know what was a TRC, but the youngest in the newsroom do not know what to link to. If you talk about historic things, recent history, many of them were not born when the TRC happened. So it just puts such a bigger responsibility on editors to make sure that you guide and you make sure that you provide proper context and don't assume that especially your younger reporters know exactly what it was. But I want to pick up on the issue of interlinking and data journalism, right? So if we can look at the minimum wage app that we developed together with a civic tech organization. This is one of the interesting things of this new mindset within which we work. So there's much more linkages between newsrooms, civic tech, digital rights and digital equality type organizations. We have come up with a minimum app that we developed with Open Up, one of the civic tech, which illustrates what the new paradigm is. It's not just putting a story out there. It is actually getting the data and put it into an interactive app that you can then, you as a user, can then manipulate it and see on this app, for instance, you can see if the minimum wage is 3,500 and I have 3 dependents or 6 dependents, how many plates of food can I put on the table? Wow. And still pay my accommodation and my transport and all of that stuff. So it's not just a few paragraphs of news, it is now a rich experience where somebody can go and interact with it. And the most important thing is, so I can look at how the news or that information would affect me as an individual.
Real life.
And it gives much more value than the old paradigm of news.
All right, it's like we've run out of time, but I know that during 2019 we'll have many more conversations, especially with this slightly big event called the elections on the way. Thanks so much indeed.
That's our big focus.
Thanks so much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us.
Thank you.
All right, we take another quick break, and coming up after, we're going to take a look at what kind of trends await the media industry in the wake of this 4th Industrial Revolution, or 4.0. More coming up.
On the agenda, Blaine and I have such an amazing team of writers and producers and a technical team that's so aware of the needs of our viewers and the constant need to be independent and impartial. I'm Desiree Chauke and I am SABC News.
We pride ourselves on being impartial as well as independent. On the agenda, we basically break down the stories of the day.
Give the viewer the assurance that we will cover every side of the story.
Tear gas has now been also thrown at the protesters.
We are peacefully marching and the police is stopping the people, they're hitting the people, we are spraying the people with pepper spray. These people are supposed to protect us, but they are against us.
We are pushing them back by using the rubber bullets because we cannot allow them to block the roads and damage other people's property.
Quite important to bring on board all sides and hear what everybody has to say about a story, especially being the public broadcaster.
All in all, we basically take the news agenda of the day forward.
Did you know the big hole digging started in 1871 and ended on the 14th August 1914? The hole produced 2,722 kgs of diamonds. However, one diamond as huge as 490 carat of stone found in the open prior 1868 gave them the interest to dig. Extracted from 22.5 million tons of soil. Today, the hole sits at a breathtaking 214 meters deep. Kimberley Big Hole attracts tourists from all over the world, taking a vintage tram past the city, then cycling around the Big Hole.
We are at the forefront of Africa's tech discussion.
We're already planning for the 5G spectrum to be licensed by 2020.
In Mauritius, for fiber migration, we had a strategy. On network, we have gadgets, robots, and more.
We focus on investing in entrepreneurs and technology in emerging markets.
There's technology and social media news on Network with Ms. Pumelele Zondi every Saturday at 8:30 p.m. and every Sunday at 5:30 p.m.
Welcome back. You're still watching Media Monitor, and we're going to start getting into the final bits of the program this week, and we're taking a look at what the trends are likely to be that we're looking forward to as the media, as this Industrial Revolution 4.0 is upon us. And Nelisa Ngolana is the Managing Director at PR Trends ZA and joins us now to tell us a little bit more about some of the upcoming trends in this space. Nelisa, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So I am quite excited. I mean, 2019 is upon us, and what I'm finding as I get older is that the future is happening much quicker than ever before. Yeah. I mean, I am very old school in some things. I remember when we had the digital watches and we thought those were amazing. And the next set of watches took a long time. So, but things are happening much faster now. Yes. So you as a trend watcher are anticipating the future as in every 2 weeks almost.
Yes.
So what are the big things that you see for 2019, even before we go to later?
At the heart of obviously this fourth industrial revolution is automation. So really looking at what can we automate. I mean, there's a lot of power in the automation. I mean, a lot of people view it as a negative because it means people lose jobs. But the opposite side of it is that it can take care of all those mundane, repetitive things that we don't have to do, which means that it opens people up to the things that robots can't do, which is kind of like the analysis of content. There's a lot of
the emotional stuff.
Yes, that human connection. So we're able to automate more. We can now set our social media to tweet things on our behalf, to post on Facebook, to post on Instagram, for example, so that you can focus on creating live videos on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook, so that you're paying more attention to that and all those other things that you can automate. So automation is great. I mean, it's definitely something that a lot of media producers should be latching on, because there's a lot of technology out there.
So end of 2018, we saw Jacob Zuma become a Twitter person. And I wonder if that isn't an acknowledgement that you can't not get on this train, this 4.0.
No, absolutely. The one thing that's come out of this revolution is the fact that people actually want to connect. I mean, that's it's a natural human thing, but people are connecting in such segmented ways. So Jacob Zuma has fans on Facebook who are interested in certain aspects of what he does. Twitter is a completely other community. So you can't be on one and not be on the other. So, this social media shrinks the distance between people, and it's a good way to connect. Once again, it's that humanness that the technology can't replace that.
So, the other thing that I'm starting to see more and more of is I go onto YouTube, and before it used to be just for videos of music and so on and so forth, but now we're seeing ordinary people setting up channels and telling you to press the subscribe button bottom left. And more, I'm thinking, are people going to watch television, or are they going to be watching YouTube?
People are not, I mean, I look at my daughter, I have a teenager. She watches a lot more things on YouTube than she does on television. So there's a great need to understand where people are accessing information, and also understanding that in the continent, a lot of people access information mobile first. So how do we get ahead of that? And people connect. I mean, when you analyze the numbers in terms of engagement with content, people connect more with visuals. So photographs, videos. You want to, people connect better. Those things leave a more lasting impression. So yes, do subscribe.
So 2019, we're going to see elections in South Africa, and I suspect that they're going to be different to other elections that we've done ever before. We're probably going to see people Snapchatting, live streaming as they stand in queues, and we'll get a better sense of what's happening in our polling stations. Before, we had to hope that we had enough cameras to get to these places. but we're not there anymore, and it's going to be different this year, isn't it? This
No,
2009.
absolutely. And I think, you know, we as people have become de facto reporters ourselves. And I think it's a great thing because, you know, newsrooms, media producers, and would never be able to be at every voting station everywhere. So we need to be prepared for how do we harness that content that's going to be coming through, and how do we get ourselves ready as well to verify some of that information, because as one of your earlier guests mentioned, we trust traditional media brands. So how do, you know, media content producers position themselves for that? I mean, it's beautiful that people will be out there taking charge of their own thing, putting content out there. It means we get to have lots of you know, we get a real sense of what the country is going to be feeling. We get a, you know, a palpable sense of what that vibe is, and there's no other, you know, more honest and upfront way than seeing that shaky video, those terrible pictures.
Right. Perhaps as a final question, what's the biggest trend that you see for the next 2-3 years? What is it that's going to be game-changing, do you think?
Definitely cybersecurity, in my opinion, because traditional media, the great thing about it is that it has a very structured framework. It has regulation. There are codes of conduct. There are all those things that guide how you put out information, what you put out, as opposed to this world that has now opened up, where anyone can create, but not only just create, but also the theft of intellectual property, the safety of data. So I think a lot of you know, a lot of the reports that I've been looking at that look at how prepared is media for it. That's the one big space of that, you know, very threatening space that the media needs to look at. Definitely cybersecurity for me.
But with it comes a lot of excitement as well. Lisa, thanks very much indeed for giving us a view perhaps of what the future might look like, and I'm very excited to embrace it. And that's where we're going to leave Media Monitor for this week. Thanks very much indeed for watching, and have a fabulous 2019, everybody. Bye-bye.
SABC is independent and impartial, and it's important that as we deliver the news, we do so without fear, without favour, without prejudice, and that we ensure that we get the multiplicity of views so that our stories and coverage is balanced.
We pride ourselves on being impartial as well as independent. On the agenda, we basically break down the stories of the day, give it more substance and give it more detail. So all in all, we basically take the news agenda of the day forward.
But more than that, we'll be able to reflect the stories of ordinary folk, people who are trying to make ends meet, facing the most incredibly difficult obstacles and circumstances, and that they will find that their realities are expressed on the SABC.
To be a part of something like this makes me proud, and I think that to be able to report the news in a fair, just, independent and impartial way is what the public broadcaster stands for.
Buildings, submerged homes and devastated families.
Biggest earthquake in here.
Their homes and buildings moved like boats.
Big shake, and I ran as fast as I can.
These are the satellite images depicting the area before the disaster.
The ground is like a wave.
I've never seen anything like this in my life.
It is unbelievable. You can actually smell the stench of dead bodies around.
The National Hurricane Center said earlier on Tuesday that Michael was a Category 1 storm with sustained winds of up to 150 kilometers per hour. Residents were implored to get out of harm's way ahead of life-threatening waves, winds and rains. Flash flooding over the weekend caused 13 deaths in Central America after Michael formed off the coast of northern Honduras.
Today we are here to surprise a family with a Christmas gift, but most importantly, it's the necessities that they need. A few months ago, we featured Mam Zodwa, who is raising Kanyisile, who is living with Edwards syndrome. She told us all the things that she needs to make her life a bit more easier, and we are here to do just that for her. My team is waiting for me inside. Come, let's go and do this.
Christmas has arrived and Stories Untold has caught up with the spirit of giving to those that need it the most. The Stories Untold team invited Mrs. Johannesburg and her daughter, Ms. Gauteng, together with more stakeholders to surprise Mam Zodwa and her daughter Kanyisile.
When we invite you?
I think for me it's all about giving back, and with being a Play Your Part ambassador for Brand South Africa and also the Mrs. Johannesburg 2019, I think it's my passion and my purpose to actually make a difference in communities, and that's what I stand for. I think, it's a vision. It's not just about buying gifts and being here. It's about touching lives and being with her, holding her, feeling her, and spending that time.
While they thought they were going for a breakfast for the first time in their lives, the team had a lot more in store for them. After their breakfast, the single mother of one came back with no more expectations.
Bengicabanga ukuthi breakfast vele uke wabona, and then outing for breakfast just for a change, ukuthi ngalibele ngipheka umdoko endlini, ngiyenzela umntwana umdoko endlini ngipheka, yabo, ungikhiphe out nami kube na somebody ongenzela ukudla, yabo, oyenzela kanye nomntwana. So kimi ke kwaba right kakhulu, though beningenzela surprise, but at the same time ngiye ngafila all right. It's for the first time uKhanyisile thola iChristmas, ngithola isurprise eso for yena after all these years. Ungenzele into enhle. Ngiyabonga kini nonke kakhulu ne eningenzele kona kanye nomntwana. Ngiyabonga kakhulu. Nami ngiswele yazini mangizoyibeka ngesizulu. But ngiswele imlomo eyinkulungwane ukuthi ngibonge.
To appreciate Okanye and appreciate you and the work that you've put in. A friend of mine, Simprium Mhlaba, the owner Yema Bunya 911, they've came through, but they're going to sponsor a stroller.
Oh, that's nice.
So that is over and above what because they couldn't supply us to give it today. But we'll make arrangement with you.
This is what everyone had to say after Mam Zodwa was surprised and in disbelief.
Honestly and truthfully, for me, Kanyi's mom, for me, is the hero. You can imagine every day for the past 23 years, she's been waking up, taking care of this child, and she has never lost hope. For me, that's the strength. It shows the strength. It shows, the character of a person. What we have done today, for me, is nothing compared to what she's been doing for her the whole life.
This is beautiful. I am so thrilled. I think when we continuously do such commendable things, it makes me understand what our passion is, what we have been called to do as a society. These are people who make us. We narrate their stories on a day-to-day basis. So this is our only chance to say to them, we are hearing you. We understand all the troubles that you go through. We are here. We feel your pain. And we are just here to just give the little that we are able to give.
We are trying to make a difference in communities, and we'd like to do that around the world. But, there's so much of us. But slowly and surely we will do.
It honestly changes you as a person, and it changes the way you tell people's stories, because it makes you become more human. Instead of wanting to get that big story, you want to get a life-changing moment for a person. So it's important to do the storytelling and being involved, because we're all humans at the end of the day.
Some of the stakeholders that came on board to make sure that Mam Zodwa's Christmas was a merry one was La Luxe Hair Salon in Sandton that gave her a full body massage and a new hairdo.
And no one is taking
Lessons to everyone that was here is that giving isn't measured by the price tag, but by the openness of the heart. We salute Mam Zodwa for her hard work, and we wish her all the best for 2019.
What the most? Today was absolutely life-changing. You know where to find us. It's hashtag Stories Untold. Should you come across all those positive stories that make us proudly South African. To Khanyisile and her mother Zodwa, keep on keeping on. God is amazing and he's going to do great things with you guys. Everybody have a merry, merry, merry Christmas. I'm out.